Good evening, everyone. It is the first day of Farmfest, a tradition 45 years strong.
Farmers from across Minnesota and beyond come together in Morgan to talk about the latest industry news. They're joined by a number of political candidates every couple of years. Evan Berg takes us to today's political forum to learn what farm issues are taking center stage this election year.
This year's Farmfest has been a major stop for campaigns for both local and national candidates across Minnesota.
These are kind of the conversations that are happening all over rural America right now. So it was really refreshing to, address things like, expanding our domestic demand and market opportunities for agriculture.
It's an opportunity to reflect a lot of the things that I've heard across southern Minnesota just about the needs in our rural communities, rising input costs.
One of the big attractions today was the forum for Minnesota's congressional districts 1 and 2, including Republican Representative Brad Finstad and one of his Democratic Farm Labor Party challengers, Jake Johnson.
That input costs are too high, whether that's the war in Iran that continues to jack up fertilizer and diesel costs, or, honestly addressing export markets.
I'm really proud of the work that we were able to do in the House. The farm bill that we passed a few weeks back was a very strong bipartisan bill. It was the remaining portion of what we had left after the reconciliation process that was done a year ago.
Some of the topics included paving the way for the next generation of farmers, expanding to new markets for Minnesota crops like biofuels, and the accessibility of rural health care. Regardless of how they want to address the issues, both candidates say they want to make sure Minnesota's farmers remain a priority.
We're in a conflict in this country where it seems to be a lot of common sense versus a lot of crazy. And I'll choose common sense every time.
People ask me, Jake, why are you doing this crazy thing at this crazy time? Because both of those things feel very true to me. The reality is I was watching a Congress forget people like me, forget people like my family, forget people like my students.
In Morgan, Evan Berg, KEYC News Now.
Watch the full forum. You can check out the video on our website, KEYC.com.